Alright, if you were beginning this tutorial, you should have the picture of the four of us completely cut out. You should have the little tough guy Bona there ready to add some epic action behind him.
I'm too tough.
Show us your muscles.
Okay, so you also need to have your photo to go over the top to kind of give it some texture. You should have your building open, and if you have an extra sky or anything you were hoping to add in, then you should also have that open. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and select out the building, and I'm going to go ahead and leave the things in front of it, so I will also select out the palettes, but I'm going to get rid of everything else around there. Probably even cut off the top of this light here and this chimney, anything that would make selecting difficult. This is a perfect candidate to go ahead and use. I'm just going to use the straight polygonal lasso. If you preferred to use the magnetic lasso, that would be fine. But I just think it's mostly square building, so there's really no reason not to just go ahead and use it. And you can pick and choose what parts you want to keep and what parts you want to take out. You don't need to have it perfectly selected, because we are going to try to put some sky and put the explosion in front of it. But go ahead and take your time doing that, and when you're ready and you have it selected, then unpause the video and come back. Okay, once you have the selection, what you're going to do is you're going to copy it into your other picture. What I would suggest before you do that, go ahead and double click on your background layer, hit OK. I would go ahead and apply a layer mask right down there, just to see if you have any weird places that you need to fix before exporting it into the other picture. It is going to be easier to do it here. You can obviously just select that layer. Oops. You can obviously just select that layer once you get to it. Remember, when you're in the layer mask, I just made this mistake. When you're in the layer mask, you have to use the black or the white paintbrush to add or subtract away from it. So I'm going to continue just scrolling around the edges of the building to make sure that I've gotten the areas. Remember, I'm using my paintbrush. Black takes away, white adds back in. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of some edges that I didn't do an awesome job on. We will go back and refine this edge the same way we did with the other people, so make sure when you have your selection finished, you watch all the way through so that you remember how to refine that selection before you copy and paste it in. And again, I went ahead and left the things in at the bottom. You have to kind of pick a stopping point that makes sense for you, and that's going to make sense for your picture. I would suggest leaving a little more in than you would think you need. And I might even have to go back, depending on where I put the explosion. I might need to come back in and add the ground. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to say add mask to selection, and I'm going to get rid of my layer mask. And I'm going to say delete it. I don't want to do anything with it. And then I'm going to add this ground right back in. So I'm going to have it come all the way back here where this ground was, and I'll add the sky in around it. I'm going to come right above the top of that watermark. And then I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add this bottom portion in, but then I'm probably just going to crop it so that the building, that side of the building, doesn't show. Alright, now I have a ground in there, which I think is going to be necessary to make it look like we're actually standing on something. I've excluded this portion of it. I'm going to go ahead and let that be sky. But again, if I have to come back to this drawing, or to this picture, I can. So right now I have everything I want selected to copy into my other one. The easiest way to do is just hit copy, and then come into your A-Team photo. And what you're going to do is just go ahead and say paste. And what you'll notice is it's going to put it on its own layer. It's currently in front of the picture of us. So what I would do is just go ahead and copy it there. And so I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger. Remember to transform it. I go up to Edit, Free Transform. And you do want to hold Shift. Make sure you have the proportions you need. I'm only going to use a portion of the building, but I want to make sure I get my scale correct. Okay, so it really looks like we're in it. And you'll notice I don't have enough ground there to make it look realistic, because if I were making it big enough that it looked like we were really standing in front of it, it would probably have to be about that big to look normal. then I don't have any room for my explosions or anything else. So what we're going to do is I'm going to shrink mine down so that it looks like it's further behind us. And you are going to need to move it up depending on the perspective. So that's up to you and the picture that you chose to kind of play around with it in this transform section. And I'm even going to do a little skew to make my building look like it's standing up a little bit straighter. You could use perspective or even warp to make this work if you wanted to. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And then I can do what I showed you on the Victoria picture. I'm going to take this bottom portion of the ground and I'm just going to select it and say free transform, and I'm just going to stretch it downwards so I have kind of a ground. And I'm not too worried about this side over here because probably I'll put my explosion right in this corner back here. But I'm going to go ahead and transform that side as well. I don't need to use a clone stamp or anything because I can just as easily stretch that out. But remember, you have to select the portion you want and then stretch it out. I'm going to move us over. Okay, and you should just be playing around with this, getting the best thing for you, for your picture that you chose, where you look most appropriate. I'm going to go ahead and come over here and grab this helicopter sky. And actually, I don't really need to make any selections because what I'm going to do is just say select all. I'm going to bring it into this A-team photo, and I'm going to paste it in. Oops, I forgot to hit copy in this one. I need to say Control-C or Edit, Copy, and then I need to come over here and paste it in, or hit Control-V. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm going to drag it behind both of those layers because I want it to go behind the building, and then I'm going to transform it. I do want to leave the helicopter in, so that was the part that I thought was pretty cool. So I can just move this over and scale it until I have the sky that I want. Okay, so now I'm starting to get a good composite. I completely recognize that the look that I have right now, there's all different colors and all different lighting. We will deal with that in the next tutorial. For right now, I just want you to focus on getting everything in that you want to have in the building. Now, I want to go ahead and come over here and get my explosion. The explosion is probably going to be the most difficult thing as far as selecting goes, because the explosion itself has a lot of detail, and it's also very, I would say, fuzzy in a certain sense. The edge cannot look harsh, or what you're going to have is not the look of an explosion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you guys do whatever selection method you think is right, and when you get a basic selection on the outside, I want you to select the things around the explosion, so the explosion is inside of there. Do whatever you think. You probably start with the magic wand. That did a pretty good job of getting fairly close into that. Okay, and what we're going to do for this explosion is we're going to utilize our clone stamp, but before we do that, you just need to pause and take some time to work on your explosion. Alright, now that you have your explosion, the outside of your explosion selected, what we're going to do is we're going to refine our edges, similar to what we did with our layer mask, but we don't need to do that through that method. What we can do is just use this refine edge right up here, and what it's going to do is going to show us kind of that feathering effect. And I would suggest you use a fairly high amount of feathering, and then you're going to shift the edge, which means we're going to make it shift outwards. So see, if I go to the right, it's going in on the explosion. I want to shift outwards because I want to come in around it and do more of a really soft eraser. Right now I have a really rough selection, and we want to make it look like the explosion actually existed in the original picture. So go ahead and refine that edge and hit OK. And then you need to make your background layer layer 0. And then I just want you to go ahead and hit delete.
Kaboom! Kaboom! Kaboom!
Now you'll notice I have isolated this explosion, but what I need to do to kind of make the explosion work is, first of all, I've already softened the edges, and I'm just going to go ahead and probably just leave it as is now that I have the background taken out. What I'm going to do, if you got too much If you see too much sky, what you can do before you go is you can just use your eraser tool. And remember, play around with the opacity and the flow, and then maybe even pick a brush that has kind of that explosion type look to it. And then I would suggest, if you got too close, just kind of going around and giving a few clicks to that edge. I'm not erasing the whole thing, remember, because I have my opacity and my flow on my eraser turned down. I need that edge to stay soft, otherwise it doesn't look like an explosion. Okay, so if you need to do that, if you got pretty close on your selection, then you should be fine to go ahead and transfer it into your 18 picture. So what you're going to do is just say select all. We can do that because we deleted out the background. Say copy, just like you've done before, and we're going to go ahead and say paste. Okay, so our explosion ended up behind, mine ended up behind my building. So I need to pull it to the front, all right, and then I need to, again, free transform, and I need to decide where I want that explosion to be. Where do I want it to be? I'm actually going to use it to hide this weird transition from sky to ground right there. Okay, and I'm definitely going to have it go over the building, but we're going to play around with a couple of different things that can help make it look more realistic. I really want to pull it up into that building and definitely have it behind us. And then once I get it where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Okay. Now I have all the pictures that I need in here. So I need to go ahead and say save. So make sure that everything saves. And then the next time you open it, if you start the next tutorial, you just need to have your Photoshop document open. As you can see, there's a lot of little things we need to go in and work on. I suppose if you did a great job selecting and really followed along with the instructions, you could leave it as is, but it is still pretty obvious that they all came from different sources. So what we're going to do in the next tutorial is just talk about how to change lighting, change coloring, and try to get this kind of looking more like a real photo, as real as it can look with a cute little baby and explosion behind it, but you understand what I mean. So once you have all of these selections done, go ahead and save and close, and then begin with the next tutorial. I do not want you to move on to the next tutorial until you've really done a great job selecting. And in fact, I strongly encourage you to raise your hand and ask me if I can check it, and I will let you know if I see any obvious places where the selections are going to be a problem.